Hey guys, Saf here with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and I'm back for 2022 with another For Science video. And in this video, it's going to be a continuation of the Hydra preview video that I did just before the new year. Now, my plan was always to do a part 2 before the Christmas and holiday break. However, with the way that Hydra went, the deterrence changes, it was a bit difficult to see what we were going to actually finish with by the time holidays came. I'd run out of time. So I'm now doing that at the start of rotation 2. I just collected my rewards today and we were able to, as a clan, get the hard and normal down. And to be honest, I have to say Hydra has been, for the last 4 weeks, for me, complete failure of a new big content. And the reason why I state this is nobody is engaging with this content anymore that I can see. Our clan, if I just look at our numbers, we are fairly end game. We always compete at tier 6 in clan versus clan. We're at around about 4.5 million points. We're certainly not a whale clan or a kraken clan, but we are 166. We do have lots of end game players. They're all pushing all the time. Most of them are doing nightmare. Like if I look at our normal clan boss right now, you know, everyone has got 2 key or 1 key comps in here. Now, when I looked yesterday, 12 hours before reset, in our clan, we had managed to have 11 individuals put keys into normal and 5 put into hard. We haven't beaten hard boss yet. I think we have in the first week, but we haven't beaten brutal and we haven't beaten nightmare at all. So we're pretty much in the boat of everyone else in the game right now, apart from your mad or your top clans who managed to cheese their way up to nightmare. So far, there is only one team that I have seen that is extremely successful at Hydra, and that is the archetype of a Duchess with a single target, or like a Krisk style. It doesn't have to be Krisk, but it is very much more difficult without Krisk. And then enemy max HP, Royal Guards or Husks. The only way you can deal damage to get to your keys is enemy max HP or HP burn. So your Venus, your Ninja, your 2 Messia, or your Royal Guards or Husks, or Septimus in some cases. And generally that is so limiting. We also have issues with the fact that the Torment head can only really be dealt with by Shamael or Duchess. Now we've got Tutura, but it's still quite not the same thing because you lose the revive, and that's kind of an important part of that team. In addition, you've got to deal with the Mischief head. There's not enough Hex champions out there, and in this rotation in particular, where we now have the head of Blight, who does Poison Cloud, there's only one champion that I can think of that is actually going to be able to deal with the Blight head if you haven't got HP burn out before he does Poison Cloud. Now obviously we haven't got the Decay head, which is good, which means you can't cleanse the HP burn, so that's at least something. But then we still also got to deal with Wrath, and pretty much I think most people at the moment, if they get a Wrath head pop out of Hydra, they restart the run. So why is it a failure? Failure 1, the champion pool to actually deal with the components is extremely limited to very, very strong champions. Issue 2, you can't deal enough damage other than enemy max HP and HP burn. Those are the only 2 options that you have available to you. Issue 3, you don't really get enough uptime on a lot of things. So in the last rotation, you could place block buffs as a debuff, but it would get instantly cleansed, and you have to bring another one, which means you haven't got enough champion slots. So you kind of have this situation where you can deal with the issues the heads provide, then you deal no damage, or you deal damage, but then you can't deal with the issues the heads provide. And then the last issue is the amount of RNG that goes into this encounter is insane. If you do a good start to the run, you kill the Torment head, and then you get a Wrath head out, you might as well restart, because you haven't got a solution for that, because you haven't factored that in. And if you try to bring a solution for that, you don't deal enough damage. So this is a really bad situation right now. We've seen after 4 weeks alone, engagement in our clan drop from everyone was really interested in trying to figure it out to pretty much people are doing it just to get Mithrala, and then they're going to forget it even exists. It's going to become worse than 3v3, because at least with 3v3 it's an element of PvP so people can compete and find solutions. I actually don't think, outside of the one team that you can do, that there is a solution to Hydra, because the solution will create problems that you can't deal with. In this video I'm going to go through how we can save Hydra, because it's something that has to be done very quickly and it is not too difficult to do. So one of the things I just wanted to go through is kind of having a look at some of the issues that the different rotations have. So we know that there's a lot of caps and limitations to the amount of damage you can do. Can't do more than 10% of a single head's HP from a max HP in one go. HP burns are limited, poisons are limited. But what I wanted to just quickly do is have a look at, okay, so say like we had a Royal Guard or a Husk with 200% crit damage, and then obviously the Royal Guard would have an attack multiplier as well. So how much damage, or essentially how much percentage of the amount of damage we would need to do to be able to achieve top chest would we get per difficulty? And the reason why I'm looking at this is to think, is it scaling appropriately? As in, the harder we go, does it scale correctly? And what we'll find out here is the scaling is all over the place. So on easy, so the first difficulty, we can basically get from a single Royal Guard A2, assuming that everything doesn't weak hit, because obviously you've got affinity issues, and assuming that you've got decreased defense and weaken out, which you might not have. So there's a lot of assumptions going into this. But assume you have a perfect ideal A2 with this type of build, then you're going to do about 5.4% of the total damage you need to do to achieve top chest on normal, and this is this figure down here. But what you'll see is then the jump to hard, that drops significantly because of the way that the stats are scaling. You're now down to 3.5%, so you need another 1.5% per A2. So I just did a little adjustment there, and I've actually looked at how many of the essentially Royal Guard A2s would we need to achieve top chest. Now you can see on easy you get 18, so that's pretty good scaling. You'd think that's the way it should work. But then it jumps to hard at 28, so you need another 10 A2s to effectively do enough damage. Now this assumes that all you had is Royal Guard. Obviously you'd have other damage. I'm just putting this out there as a comparison to kind of demonstrate how the scaling is flawed within Hydra. Normal is too easy in essence for what you need, and then hard becomes almost the second most challenging amount of damage you need to do, followed by brutal and then nightmare. So the scaling is not going linearly, it's kind of going up, down, or it's going down, up, down, which is not good. Obviously trying to deal enough damage here to get those chests is a challenging thing. Like, there's no champion in the game that is going to be able to compete with Royal Guard's 1.4 million per A2 because of the scaling of the HP of the heads. The other interesting thing to note here is obviously this assumes rotation 2, so we haven't got the Suffering Head. The Suffering Head would obviously add a lot more damage. In this one, it's going to be harder to get more damage because you haven't got a big HP head. You've got the highest one, which is Wrath, which again, we're going to discuss in a second, I think is totally idiotic. I think the issue you've got here is this shows that they haven't looked at the scaling properly, so we need to look at the stat scaling to ensure that it works correctly. I haven't got an issue with the fact that easy is super easy, because it should be. It's the most accessible players should be in. But in terms of why is hard more difficult than nightmare, that doesn't make sense to me. So what I'm going to go through here now is, if I was in charge of game design at Plarium, how would I fix and save Hydra? Because right now I can see it's a dying system already. People hate it, they don't like the RNG, they don't engage with it, they don't find it fun, they find it boring, slow. We need to do something to make it more interesting, save it, and accessible. So one of the principles you'll see here is something that Hellhades has talked about in his videos, in which difficulty in traditional games scales and the content becomes challenger. Effects become more difficult or get added as you go up in difficulties. That doesn't really happen in Raid. The Bommel boss that you fight at level 10 normal is the same Bommel boss in terms of what he does at stage 90 hard. The difference is they just scale speed and stats. Now that kind of scaling can work to some extent, but it doesn't work in Hydra because the fact that you give me a fear at the easiest difficulty without having a Shamael or a Duchess, and the same at Nightmare, means that it doesn't matter what stats you scale, it's still as difficult, because if you don't have a champion to deal with that, it doesn't work. So what we're going to do is scale things based on difficulty, and we're going to target heads and some global changes. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the head of Torment. It's probably the most annoying one, and also one of the most niche ones. You need to bring certain champions. If you attack the Torment head and you don't have a perfect Veil out, or you don't have Shamael in your team, you will get true feared every single time without a cooldown. And this is just far too difficult for people starting off that have just got unlocked Hydra. If they haven't got a Shamael or a Duchess, they're stuffed. There is no solution. Tatura helps, but it's not ideal still. You're still talking 3 champions. Keeping in mind, you've got to build potentially 3 teams here. You could 1 key normal, but if you wanted to do brutal, then you've just lost your champion. So what I would first do is I would change his A2. Now the reason this is an optional change, The reason why I would change it is a head should be designed around its kit. This guy is designed to do fears, so therefore the damage should be reduced if I'm neutralizing his effects. Right now it will just increase by 25% for every debuff you're under. I think it should be he increases damage by 50%, so it's more aggressive, but that is only if you're under a fear. So the idea is if you remove the fear, it's just a normal attack. If you don't remove the fear, it actually hurts more. It's an optional change. I just think it's a better design principle. Then I would change his passive completely. Instead of it being 100% chance on attack, I would change it to scale for a percentage as you increase difficulty. So on normal, it would be 10%. The next difficulty, 25, and then on brutal, 50%, and then on nightmare, you've got a 75% chance on attack that you get true feared. I would also change it that perfect veil or veil works. There is a rare in the game that can do an AoE veil, which I highlighted in my sort of mini list that I didn't release. But then once they corrected themselves to say it's only perfect veil, I was like, well, that's just even worse. Realistically, until Tutura Rhyme Hide was released, the only good, reliable AoE veil champion was Duchess. You had Rector, but you needed to be full HP, and you had a few other weird single targets, like a Bora can do it to herself. But ultimately, if you wanted reliable AoE, it was Duchess. So what people did, as I predicted, was go to Shamael. That worked for the cheese strategy, but it means that one of your slots is always Shamael, or always Duchess, and I think it's just too hard to do that in the early game, especially when you might not have multiples of these champions. By changing it to a percentage, it means it's not guaranteed. Basically means on normal you could almost avoid having to worry about the Torment head, but you still have the risk of a 10%. Once you get to Nightmare, then you definitely need a solution, but in normal and hard, you probably can avoid it a little bit. The next head is Head of Suffering. Now, there's not a lot I would change in this. All I would do is scale the passive so that it gets harder as you progress. I would just change that to 20, 30, 40, 50. I think the head in itself is well designed. It's designed to be the tank, so it's slow. It's designed to put ally protection out, reflect. You can deal with those with a buff strip, block buffs. There are solutions around that. So I think generally it's well designed. I wouldn't change anything else other than just scale it. So the head of Mischief has got a lot of changes for me, and the changes I would make here is to basically open up accessibility for this head. The idea of using Hex was great. The only problem is they made it so you had to hit him. So in the sense that if he was under Hex, you could hit him. If he wasn't, then you wouldn't be able to hit the boss. It's 75% chance. Now, in my initial video, I thought the Lesia would be a great choice here. But what I've come to realize is the Lesia needs to hit the target. Well, she's not going to hit the target because every time she tries and doesn't have Hex, it gets redirected. And it became almost like a great idea, but it just wasn't going to work. Which meant that you were left with kind of Ruel, I think, was the only one who could place the Hex consistently. Obviously, his passive was really good. The only problem is he's squishy as hell. Not designed for this type of content where you're going to be taking a lot of potential damage. Firstly, I would make it so his A1 doesn't steal all the buffs. It should scale, and it should never be all the buffs. So what I would do at easy, I would make it as 1, and the same as hard. And then on brutal, it would go to 2, and then nightmare to 3. I would also make it so he doesn't steal turn meter rather than drops turn meter. What you tend to find on rotation 1 is he would go and attack one target, steals 50% turn meter. He's also the fastest head. And then the Decay head would fill 30% when he cleanses. So the Mischief head is effectively getting an extra turn. It's way too quick, and what ends up happening is if you miss one block buff, so you miss one control, it falls apart very quickly. So I would just remove the stealing and make it so he drops turn meter. So you're still having a negative effect all the way through all difficulties, but you can manage it better. And on the A1, I'd move the passive Hex effect into the A1, where instead of it being a percentage chance for you to attack and he redirects, what he will do instead is he won't steal it if he's under Hex, and he won't drop your turn meter if he's under Hex. So Hex is not mandatory, but it makes it easier. I would also increase his A2 buff spread to 4 turn cooldown instead of 3, because he's just way too quick and it's too much of a snowball. Now, some of these changes might make Mischief almost not a problem, and you could probably scale it back. But I think these changes need to make it so that Mischief itself is a controllable head that you can do something with, rather than having a thing of, well, I can't attack it, so if he eats a target, great, I'm stuffed. Can't do anything, because I haven't brought a Hex champion because I don't have Ruel or I don't have another option. If you wanted to make Hex more like it is now, you need more Hex champions, almost double what you've got. And they need to be placements, and they need to be more other things. If you think that other effects, like decreased defense now, we've got over 100, 200 effects. There's like 12 Hex effects. It's not enough. So it was just a failure to bring this system in. So we haven't had much experience with the Head of Blight yet. We obviously have had it come out a few times. This is now going to be in this rotation, so we do need to see a solution here as well. So what the Blight Head does, which is unique, is places Poison Cloud. Now, the issue with Poison Cloud is if you don't have HP burn out before you place it, you can only do it if you place the HP burn, because otherwise every attack you do is going to be weak hits. That means there is one champion that can do this. I think from the top of my head there may be another one, and that is Mordecai. Maybe Drex does it as well when he gets attacked. I'm not too sure. But Mordecai is the only one that I know of that can place HP burn, which means he doesn't need to attack. He might become a very big MVP of rotation 2. So what I would do to fix this issue, because I think it does need some adjustments here, is firstly I would scale the A1 consistently here. You know, placing 3 poisons on that first hit is quite a lot to deal with. You have to essentially bring a team cleanse. So I would scale it so it's 1, 1, 2, 3 on all the difficulties. So Nightmare again becomes what it is now, so you have to deal with it at the top level, but there's accessibility there for lower players and mid players to actually get progression and learn the mechanics. A2 I would change it to do just instant poison damage if under leech. I wouldn't add another poison on top because it just becomes egregious. Like you're taking 4 2-stack poisons. It's way too strong. And the A3 then, what I would actually make it do, if there is a HP burn on Blight, then the poison cloud is not a protected buff. Right now, if it goes on, the only thing that can disable it is HP burn. If you place the poison cloud and you haven't got HP burn out there, you can never deal with anything. Like you basically can't do anything. You can't do damage, you can't place debuffs, it's all weak hits. So if you have HP burn on the Blight, that's a strategy that you bring into it. You know I'm going to be dealing with Blight, so I need to make sure I've got some form of HP burn. If it's AoE or single target, opens up the avenues of options here on the Head of Blight. You know, you could talk about Elenaro. There's an irresistible A1 HP burn, so you could bring that in. That would be a good solution. It just opens up more options. If that's on Head of Blight, Poison Cloud still places, but it can be cleansed or removed and it's not protected. And I think that's a good balance. Head of Wrath for me is a big issue right now. The stack counter is stupid, it's too low, and when you look at how much HP a Head of Wrath has, you just can't kill it in time. The concept that I'm reading a Head of Wrath is, if you don't kill it by the counter, you die. That should be the mechanic, okay? It's kind of like an enraging counter. It's a bit like the Griffin passive where if you let him get too strong, then you get over-controlled. So I don't necessarily think you need to die from it, but you should be working around that mechanic. This needs to change. So what I would do first is A1 places a decrease attack. Again, consistently with everything else I'm saying here. Scale it on difficulty. On the early levels, make it only a 25% decrease attack. On the higher levels, on Brutal and Nightmare, make it 50%. I'd also remove the Provoke. He's not meant to be a tank. He's not meant to be a director. He's meant to hit hard. So why is he provoking? It doesn't make sense. It's just adding more difficulties to you don't need to deal with this head. Secondly, then, when we get to the passive here, I would make it so that his passive counter, the Vengeance, doesn't proc on everything. Right now, if you do HP burn on someone, he gets a stack. If you do poison on him, he gets a stack. It's just indirect damage shouldn't be increasing that Vengeance stack. It should be only on hit stuff. So that's what I would change. I would remove that. So you actually have to physically hit him to increase the stack. And then I would dramatically increase the stacks here and scale it on difficulty. So on easy right now, it's 15. On Nightmare right now, it's 15. There is no difference. You're not going to kill the Vengeance head in 15 stacks. So that's out of the question. You probably won't even take a dent out of him in 15 stacks. So what I would do is I would make it 40. It gives normal a fighting chance of either tanking one hit or being able to kill it before that one hit. I would then scale it by 5 down to a 25. So we add 10 more hits to it. So what that basically means is, yes, we're going to get less Vengeance hits. Okay, it might make the head really weak, potentially. You know, you'd have to play test it. If I was a dev, I'd get it in development environment and actually play test this thing and see how it feels. But by giving players more time, they have more options to deal with it. Maybe I can get a block buffs out in the time that I know Vengeance buff is going to happen and try and reduce the damage I'm going to take. I would also scale the Vengeance. You see a pattern here. Scale the Vengeance. Instead of it being 300% at an easy and 300% at normal, yes, okay, attack will scale the damage a little bit, but you're still increasing his damage the same on both. Make it 50, 100, 200, 300. Players get a chance to do stuff at easy, and then they can work towards Nightmare and understand it's going to get harder. That's how I would change Wrath Head. It becomes The idea of this Wrathhead then is a enrage counter that if you can't kill it within the count time, you're going to take a big hit and you need to deal with it. For me, in rotation 1, the thing I undervalued most was the relationship between Mischief and Decay. It was brutal. The solution to Mischief could be a block buffs. The problem is Decay cleanses the block buffs, and then he gives a turn meter fill, and it just runs out of control quickly, which meant you either had to bring 2 block buff champions, or you had to bring decreased speed and hope you could get back around to your skill, and it was very difficult. So I would change Decay, and I would remove instantly the turn meter fill on A2. An AoE full cleanse is enough on a 4-turn cooldown. We don't need the heads taking 30% more turn meter when they're already running at 200 plus speed. Additionally, I would make it so that the passive that the Head of Decay does, where he decreases your max HP, scales with difficulty. 5%, 10%, 15%, 20% of your maximum HP gets lost. And the other big thing I would do is they need to remove the fact that the Head of Decay can decrease your max HP when you're not even healing. Overhealing, excess healing, healing at full HP, that doesn't need to be taken off, because you use a champion like Demitha or Wither the Crowned or Doom Priest to Hanorak, you're losing that 25% HP, but you're not gaining anything. So that you're not like going, oh, well, I needed to heal, so I get punished for that. It's if I have Immortal on, regeneration, all of these sets become kind of really low value and not ideal because of the issues of this. So then what I would do after that, those are the head changes. I would then make some global changes here. So the first thing I would do is make every head poisonable. It doesn't make sense to me. Maybe the head of Blight, the one that does poison, should be immune, but some of the other heads, I think 3 of the 6 can be poisoned. They should all be poisoned. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's not like there's anything like thematically, at least with Spider, it makes sense. A Spider would deal poison. It's thematically, it doesn't make sense. But in this instance, only the Blight head, if anything, should be immune to poisons. I would make HP burn scale linearly. So on normal, you would do 50,000 max on a HP burn, hard 40,000. So it basically means HP burn becomes less of a viable solution as you go up and you have to rely more on your champions. I would also give you more time during a decapitation state. Right now, it doesn't feel like decapitation is up long enough for you to do anything with it. So I would increase it to 5, 5, 4, 3. Right now, I think you get it for 2 turns. I think it should be by default up by 1. And that just means that it gives you more time to do more damage. And then I would also scale Mark of the Hydra. Right now, I think it goes on 16 turns, and then every subsequent mark is reduced by 1. I would increase that base to 20 on Nightmare, and then on easy and hard, I would change it to 30. So it gives you time as a player to manage the mark. I would also change the digestion timer. So I think 5 on Nightmare is okay. It's difficult, but it's fine. But on easy, being eaten for 5 turns, especially when it's the Mischief head, it doesn't feel comfortable. I would scale it 8, 7, 6, 5. So it means you get 8 turns when a champion is eaten, and then every subsequent digestion goes down by 1. So it means on normal and hard, you're learning the mechanics, but you are not completely obliterated by them, and you're not dealing with the same mechanics as what you would deal with a Nightmare. It just gets harder as you scale. The other thing I would do, and this might be a controversial one, is I would make it so that head 5 and 6 would never appear in a rotation. The initial thing that Playroom said was we wanted rotations so that you had to apply different strategies. Well, the problem is, if you kill a head, then you could get any of the other 2 heads, so therefore you need a strategy that deals with all 6 heads. And all 6 heads is too many things to deal with only 6 champions. Make it so the 4 head rotation are the only 4 heads you get. When you kill a head, it decapitates, you get the same head back. We can build a strategy around those heads. Don't make it so that if I kill the head of Torment and my strategy was reliant on bringing champions to deal with Torment, then Wrathhead comes out and, oh, I don't have block buff, so I don't have decreased attack because I was able to tank the others fine. Maybe, the Blight head comes out, which is what would happen in rotation 2, but I'm going to HP burn now because I didn't need HP burn to deal with Poison Cloud because it wasn't in the starting thing. So I think make it so that 5 and 6 don't happen. And then what you can do is increase the rotations to a weekly basis. So change it up. If you want to have different rotations, if you want 4 or 5 different rotations, you can have them on a different scaling pattern. It means that players will still have the same thing where they have to adapt strategies week on week, but it won't be a situation where, oh God, I could get any head, RNG. We need to eliminate RNG from Hydra a little bit. It's too much. Make it so that I know what 4 heads I'm facing, I can build a strategy and team around it, and then I can do more with my team, and I can have more fun. And then finally, what I would say is if you get to a situation where you've managed to kill all 4 heads, you should get like a bonus reward. and that should basically drop all the decapitation heads, turn it to 0, so basically resets them and starts them ticking up, and increase them by another 100%. So it's kind of like a bonus objective. If you kill one head, it's the standard decapitation. If you kill all 4 heads, great, you get a bonus and you can start really pumping out some damage. Finally, I would adjust some base stats. I think some things are in the wrong place. Wrath being high defense, high HP, and lower attack makes no sense to me. I would basically make him a bit more of a glass cannon. The idea of Wrath is meant to be a big damage, but it should be squishy, in the sense that you need to kill it quickly and kill it first. Don't make him then a tank. It's ridiculous the way it's stat. So I would drop his HP by 10%, drop the defense by 30%, give him more attack because he should hit hard, and drop his resistance because I think he's the highest resistance head apart from Suffering. Because you want to be able to debuff him and go at him. You know, he shouldn't be sitting there as like a tank that's going to nuke you. With the Mischief head, I think he's a fraction too fast. I think he's about 250 at the top rotation. It should be dropped by about 10%. Suffering, I would give it less defense and more HP. So I think it's okay that it's got the highest defense, but 13,000 is a lot of defense. Like, there's no amount of decreased defense is going to make that lose any form of defense. To the extent that almost there's no value in adding decreased defense to him because it only drops it to 6,000, I believe. So I would drop his defense down a little bit, but I add more HP because he should be almost like an Ursuga, the way you build that type of champion, where it's like a sponge. Make it a lot more HP and give it more resistance. Make it a Giga Tank, but don't make it a defense Giga Tank. And finally, I would drop the defense of Decay as well, because that doesn't feel balanced amongst the other heads. Just a little bit, 20%. So I hope that was interesting for you watching. That would be how I would design Hydra right now. And I personally believe if they don't do something quickly, it's going to die and create a lot of negativity as a new system. And Hydra should have been something that was really fun and exciting. I don't personally enjoy it. I think it's the worst system in the game right now. And these changes would make it so at least I can have more fun with finding different ways to build a team. Right now, it very much feels like if I haven't got a Duchess and I haven't got Royal Guards built, then I can't really build a successful high damage team even to get past hard and brutal. Since I started recording this, no one's even hit Hydra in our team. Obviously, Clan vs Clan is going on, so they're probably burning Spider, and I should probably go and do that too. But yeah, let me know what you think. If you guys have any suggestions about what you would change in Hydra, please leave them in the comments below. Maybe we can get some sort of change log built up and I can pass it over to Hellhades and he can feed it into the content creator chat. But right now, I've yet to see anyone really give me a positive result in terms of this stuff is really fun. I'm so glad they added this to the game. But as usual, if you've liked this content, we'll be doing a lot more this year on different things in Raid and other games. Please give this video a like, and if you want to see more of this video, give it a subscribe. It'll come straight into your feed, and I'll be back next week with another Raid Shadow Legends video.